The air in Terminal C tasted like cheap coffee and impending disaster. I was hidden behind a pillar, wearing sunglasses large enough to obscure half my face, watching the man I married 5 years ago check in for his flight to Tokyo. Mark looked every inch the successful, slightly tired corporate consultant he claimed to be, sharp suit, rolling briefcase, and that familiar expression of focused exhaustion. But exhaustion wasn't what brought me here. It was the chilling realization that every word, every kiss goodbye, every future plan we had built together was nothing more than a carefully engineered firewall protecting a life I didn't know existed. The moment Mark handed his passport over the counter, the lie became physical reality. This wasn't a spontaneous suspicion. This was the culmination of 18 months of creeping dread of finding small, inexplicable discrepancies, a faded children's sticker on the inside of his laptop bag, the unfamiliar scent of jasmine lingering on a shirt returned from the dry cleaners, and the sheer volume of his international meetings that always coincided with major holidays. Today, I wasn't waiting for a simple affair to be exposed. I was hunting for a ghost, a secondary existence so solid it had managed to swallow half of my marriage whole. I watched his shoulders relax as he passed security, a small, subtle easing of tension that I realized wasn't relief at starting a trip, but relief at crossing the threshold into his other world. I had booked a ticket on a flight departing an hour later, a refundable fare to nowhere, just so I could clear security and follow him to the gate. I needed proximity. I needed evidence. I needed the truth to stop being a whisper in the back of my mind and start screaming directly into my eyes. Mark's routine had always been impeccable, almost military in its precision. He managed a supply chain for a major electronics company, which meant quarterly trips to Asia, monthly trips to Europe, and the occasional rush job to South America. He'd meticulously detail his itinerary, forward hotel bookings, and even set up auto-replies on his work email. He was a master of documentation, which is exactly why the tiny cracks in his fortress were so devastating. I remembered the night I found the travel wallet. It was tucked into the lining of an old suitcase. It contained 3 things: a foreign driver's license photo of Mark looking slightly younger and cleaner shaven, a small laminated picture of a woman I didn't recognize, and a health insurance card for a child named Leo. Leo! The name punched the air out of my lungs. I hadn't been looking for an affair. I was looking for proof he was cheating on me. What I found suggested he might have been cheating on her, or worse, that she was his first wife, and I was the secret. The discovery didn't provoke a screaming match. It instigated a cold, calculated investigation. I didn't ask questions. I started tracking every financial transaction, every flight path, and every cell tower ping. The Tokyo trip was his undoing. He told me it was Flight 118. My quiet check of his airline loyalty account showed he had only banked miles for Flight 118 connecting to a regional carrier in Seoul, a carrier that serviced one location primarily, a small coastal town in Argentina where the foreign license indicated he had residency. Tokyo was the decoy, Seoul was the transit point, and Argentina was home. My hands were clammy inside my gloves. Even in the cool, air-conditioned terminal, I kept the required distance, using the vast crowd of international travelers as my camouflage. I watched Mark settle near Gate 42, his briefcase on the seat next to him, scrolling through his phone. He looked ordinary, completely unremarkable, and that normality was the cruelest part of the betrayal. How could someone who shared my bed, my mortgages, and my dreams possess such a profound capacity for compartmentalization? It wasn't just lying. It was constructing an entire alternate reality, brick by tedious brick. I remembered the time I had gotten gravely ill, and he had been stuck in London for a crucial negotiation. Now I pictured him instead, rocking a child to sleep, soothing a fever I didn't even know existed. I pulled out my own ticket, checking the gate number again. Gate 42 was, indeed, the Tokyo flight. But I knew the layover in Seoul was the key. He wasn't meeting a client in Japan. He was meeting the person who was the primary beneficiary of his double life. I waited, heart hammering against my ribs, anticipating a quick call or a solitary text message before boarding. I hoped that maybe, just maybe, the woman in the photo was a relative, a forgotten cousin. I needed that small, irrational flicker of hope to survive the next 20 minutes. But then Mark stood up. He wasn't looking at his phone. He was looking past the milling crowd, a warm, genuine smile starting to spread across his face, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. The moment his gaze locked onto someone across the busy corridor, the energy around him shifted. The corporate shell dissolved, replaced by a tenderness that was so raw and immediate. It felt like I was watching an intimate scene through a keyhole. I lowered my head, pretended to adjust my backpack, and slid closer to a duty-free kiosk, my pulse roaring in my ears. The person he was looking at was navigating the crowd towards him. First, I saw the woman from the laminated photo. She was beautiful, not in the polished, put-together way I was, but in a vibrant, sun-kissed, undeniably natural way. She wore simple clothes and carried a massive leather shoulder bag. But it wasn't just her. Tucked tightly against her leg, clutching a tattered stuffed dinosaur, was the little boy, Leo. He was a miniature version of Mark, with the same slightly unruly dark hair and the intense blue eyes that always crinkled when he truly laughed. This was not a meeting. This was a reunion. They didn't shake hands or exchange polite pecks on the cheek. Leo launched himself at Mark's legs, shouting, "Poppy," and Mark scooped him up instantly, the expensive suit jacket folding awkwardly around the small frame. The woman approached slowly, her eyes shining with relief and profound affection. She reached up and smoothed Mark's tie, her touch proprietary, familiar, utterly wifely. The world narrowed down to the triangle they formed, Mark, the woman, and Leo. I watched Mark press his forehead against the woman's, their conversation silent for a moment, an exchange that spoke volumes about shared history, trust, and deep marital intimacy. This was not a mistress Mark visited on the side. This was his life. This was the home he went to when he wasn't here. I watched the woman pull a small, silver ring from her keychain and effortlessly slide it onto Mark's ring finger, a plain band, clearly something he wore when he was them and removed when he was us. The Tokyo trip was a lie, the meetings were a lie, and the entire structure of my marriage was built on sand. They were boarding the flight together as a family headed to a place where he was known as a dedicated husband and father. The pain wasn't a sharp stab. It was a cold, spreading numbness, the realization that the betrayal wasn't about sex. It was about identity. He had 2 wives, 2 names, and 2 entirely different calendars. He was a complete stranger living inside my house. Before I dive deeper into the moment I decided what to do with this devastating knowledge, I need to know what you think. If you found out your partner was living a complete second life, not just an affair, but a second family, a second home, Would you confront them immediately at the airport and shatter their facade, or would you retreat, gather your evidence, and execute a cold, calculated plan? Share your thoughts and strategy in the comments below. Now, back to Gate 42. The decision to stay silent, to not rip off the sunglasses and scream his name, was the most disciplined thing I have ever done. It was born not of weakness, but of a sudden, icy clarity. A scene now would have given Mark exactly what he wanted: the dramatic chaos of a breakdown, an opportunity to manipulate the narrative to plead temporary insanity or exceptional circumstances. I wanted the facts to speak for themselves, cold and undeniable. I quietly activated the video function on my phone, holding it low against my hip, pretending to text. The quality was shaky, but the audio was clear. I captured the woman calling him Marcos and asking about the flight details in perfect Spanish. I captured Leo whining that his dinosaur needed a seat by the window, and Mark soothing him with that deep, paternal voice I had always longed for him to use with the children we never had. I zoomed in subtly on the simple silver band, now glinting on his finger, directly next to the empty space where my elaborate platinum wedding ring should have been. I filmed their boarding passes as they handed them over, Marcos and Elena Santiago, with a shared itinerary to Buenos Aires. Santiago, that was the last name on the health insurance card. Everything clicked into sickening place. He wasn't Mark Thompson, the tireless American consultant, when he was there. He was Marcos Santiago, the dedicated Argentine partner. The sheer logistical effort required to maintain this dual identity was staggering. It demanded not just deceit, but a profound and absolute separation of soul. I watched the three of them disappear down the jet bridge, a perfect, happy family unit, and I lowered my phone, the recording secured. The immediate urge was to flee the airport entirely, to get into my car and drive until the sound of the tarmac faded into silence. But I stayed. I watched the electronic board, switched the Gate 42 status to closed. The sense of finality was overwhelming. I felt like I was watching the closing credits of my own life, a life I had mistakenly believed was a shared narrative. I walked slowly back through the crowded concourse, every joyful tourist, every smiling couple feeling like a direct assault on my reality. When I finally reached the parking garage, I didn't start the car. I just sat in the driver's seat, staring at the concrete pillar in front of me, replaying the scene. The way the little boy's hands grasped his neck, the way Elena's gaze lingered on him. It wasn't just physical infidelity. It was the theft of time, emotion, and partnership. He had parceled out his entire identity, giving me the stressful corporate facade, while giving her the domestic, loving core. This revelation wasn't just grounds for divorce. It was grounds for feeling insane. How do you mourn a marriage that was never real? How do you grieve a betrayal that spanned continents and years, built on a foundation of meticulously organized lies? I finally started the engine, pulling out into the afternoon traffic. The plan was no longer about confrontation. It was about surgical extraction. I needed to separate myself from him financially, legally, and emotionally before he had a chance to return and resume the performance. Back in our meticulously organized $500,000 house, the silence was deafening. The place felt suddenly alien, tainted by his recent presence. I walked through the rooms, seeing his belongings, his razor, his favorite armchair, the framed photo of us smiling on our wedding day, not as relics of our life, but as props in his extended stage play. I went straight to his study, The corporate laptop was sitting on the desk, precisely where he had left it. I accessed the contents with the password I had only learned through months of patient observation. I didn't look for emotional emails. I looked for financial ties. I found it quickly, a separate ledger hidden deep within a file labeled Global Tax Strategy. It detailed consistent transfers to an Argentine bank account, payments for a house in Elena's name, and deposits into a college savings plan for Leo. The paper trail was damning, confirming that the second family wasn't merely a distraction. It was a substantial, permanent financial commitment. He wasn't just splitting his time. He was splitting our assets, leveraging my trust to fund his parallel universe. The total funds transferred over the last 5 years amounted to nearly a third of his reported annual income. I realized then that I hadn't married a man who was capable of infidelity. I had married a sophisticated fraudster. The calculation became purely strategic. Mark was due back in 10 days, claiming to be refreshed from his intense negotiations with the Tokyo executives. I knew I couldn't wait until his return to act. If I let him walk back through that front door, I risked collapsing, letting the emotional dam break. I needed to establish an impenetrable legal fortress while he was still thousands of miles away, enjoying the fruits of his double life. That evening, I called my friend, Claire, a corporate attorney known for her brutal efficiency. I didn't tell her the full story. I just told her I needed an emergency consultation regarding substantial marital fraud and asset protection. I spent the next 4 days meticulously photocopying every document, the Argentine land deeds, the transaction records, the health insurance card, and most importantly, the clear video I had taken at the airport showing Marcos Santiago embracing his wife and son before boarding their non-Tokyo flight. I opened a new bank account in my name only and initiated the process of freezing our joint accounts, citing suspicious foreign activity. I changed the locks on the house, arranging for a trusted moving company to pack up all of his personal effects and place them in a storage unit I rented, items he wouldn't need in Argentina, but which represented half of his life here. When Mark's flight was scheduled to land at 6 p.m. the following Tuesday, I was not at the arrival gate. I was sitting at the massive oak dining table, the entire surface covered with meticulously organized files, printouts, and legal notices. I didn't send a text. I didn't call. I waited for the automated ping on my phone that would tell me his Uber was pulling into the driveway. He would walk into a silent, locked house, his luggage containing the casual clothes he wore with Elena, the smell of his other life clinging to them. The key I left for him was taped to the mailbox, accompanied by a single, thick envelope. Inside, he wouldn't find a tear-stained note or an accusation scribbled in haste. He would find a summons for immediate divorce proceedings based on marital fraud, a notarized copy of the airport video, and a demand for immediate asset division, including the financial repayment of all funds funneled to Buenos Aires. My pain was still immense, a heavy stone in my chest, but it was fortified by the quiet, crushing dignity I had found at the airport. I had followed him and seen everything. And in seeing it, I had finally seen the necessity of letting him go entirely. The betrayal was absolute, but my resilience had proven stronger than his capacity to deceive. Thanks everyone for watching. If you liked this, please subscribe to the channel Femme Fatale Files. Leave a like and write in the comments which country you are from. Stay tuned. There will be a new story tomorrow.